Hello, horror lovers. Welcome to the chilling world of Mr. Haunt. Please subscribe. It's our biggest motivation to keep bringing you spine-tingling stories. Let us know in the comments which city you're listening from. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Now, let's get into the stories. My name is Jake Warren, and this story happened when I was 17, living in the Four Corners region of New Mexico. My family has Navajo roots, but we were what some people call lapsed, still spiritual, but not heavily involved in the traditional ceremonies. Looking back, maybe that's why we didn't recognize the signs soon enough. It began the night my older brother Caleb disappeared in the desert and came back, wearing something else's soul. We lived near Shiprock, just past the oil fields. Our house was the last one before the Mesa Trail, and Caleb loved hiking out past sunset, claiming he liked the stillness. He went out that Friday evening, said he wanted to clear his head. The sun went down, the stars came out, and Caleb never came home. At first, we thought maybe he spent the night at his friend Eli's place. But when we called the next morning, Eli hadn't seen him. We searched the desert that whole day. Me, my dad, our uncles, even the local medicine man, Ben Yazzie, joined us. At one point, Ben stopped cold on the trail, eyes locked on something in the dust. A hoof print, only it was wrong. Two toes, split like a deer's, but with sharp edges, and deep imprints like whatever left it had weight. He whispered, "You need to go home before it follows." That night, Caleb came back, or at least, something that looked like him. He walked through the front door at 2:41 a.m. I remember the exact time, because I couldn't sleep, and I'd been staring at the clock. He looked filthy. Eyes bloodshot, shirt torn, no shoes. But he smiled at me and said, "What? You look like you've seen a ghost." Everyone was relieved. My mom cried. My dad hugged him hard. But I felt something cold in my gut, because Caleb's voice was just slightly off, like someone mimicking him, but missing a beat. And when he went to his room that night, the dogs wouldn't go near him. Our lab, Ozzy, growled low and slinked under my bed. Over the next few days, the weirdness grew. He stopped eating, he never blinked, and I caught him standing out in the backyard at night, staring at the mesa, muttering words I didn't recognize. Navajo, but wrong somehow, almost like curses. Then I found the deer hide, folded under his bed, bloody and reeking of death, and claw marks on the inside, as if something had climbed out of it. I told my grandmother. She didn't say a word, just stood up, lit cedarwood, and began praying under her breath. Then she pulled me aside and whispered, "Something I'll never forget. That thing is not your brother. It's wearing him like clothing, and it's testing the boundaries." The next night, I woke to the sound of footsteps, slow, dragging. I peeked out my window and saw Caleb, or what looked like him, crouched on the fence line, his limbs twisted at wrong angles, sniffing the wind. Then he smiled at me, wide to wide, and whispered my name in a voice like 100 bones breaking at once. We called Ben Yazzie again. He came with his cousin, both of them bringing sand, ashes, and sacred herbs. They didn't try to confront it directly. Instead, they told us to leave the house at sunrise. We watched from across the road as they surrounded our home in ash and lit the fire pits around midnight. The screaming began. Not Caleb's voice, not even human. Something deeper, hollow, and furious. When the fire died out, they told us it was gone, but Caleb never came back. We held a ceremony for him 2 weeks later, burned everything he'd touched, and moved to Albuquerque not long after. But sometimes I dream of that thing. Its broken limbs, hollow eyes, and smile full of hunger. It wore my brother's face like a mask, and in that smile, I knew it remembered me. My name is Claire Hernandez. I used to work as a night nurse at a small hospital on the edge of the Navajo Nation, near Gallup, New Mexico. I've seen a lot of strange things during overnight shifts. People talking to invisible figures, sudden, cold spots in quiet rooms, even patients who swore they were being watched from the windows. But none of that prepared me for the night I heard that whistling dot, or what came with it. It was a Wednesday, just past 2:30 a.m. I was the only one on the West Wing doing routine vitals. Most of the patients were asleep. The hallway lights were dimmed. Nothing unusual until I heard someone whistling a slow, broken tune coming from outside. At first, I thought it was someone on the sidewalk, maybe a drunk or a kid messing around. But the hospital has a security fence, and that side faces nothing but dry, open desert. Still, the whistling got louder, closer. It moved along the windows, room by room. I peeked through the blinds in room 206. There was something standing just beyond the glow of the security. Lights tall, lean, draped in what looked like animal skins. Its head twitched with each step, like it couldn't quite stay still, and even though I couldn't see its eyes, I knew it was looking straight at me. Then, it stopped moving. The whistling went silent, and something scratched lightly on the glass, not like nails, like bone. I backed away and locked the window. That's when I heard the overhead intercom buzz. Just once, like someone had picked up a receiver somewhere in the hospital. Then a voice came through, but not a normal voice. It sounded broken, like someone trying to speak underwater, layered with 2 or 3 other voices. It whispered, "Claire, come outside. I'm lost." I froze, because no one else knew I was on that side of the building, and I never told anyone my shift that night. I rushed back to the nurse's station and hit the security buzzer. Silence. I tried the phone. Dead tone. Then the lights started flickering. Room 208's call light blinked on, then room 210, then 212.1 by 1, in order, like something was moving down the hallway toward me. I didn't wait to see what it was. I grabbed my keys and ran straight into the stairwell. That's when I heard it. Again. The whistling, echoing through the vents, getting closer, and for a moment, it sounded like my mom. But my mother's been gone for 5 years. I made it to the ER and told the charge nurse everything. She didn't laugh. She didn't question me. She just said one thing: "You never follow the whistling." Then she handed me a small pouch of ashes and cedar, told me to keep it on me, and called security to sweep the building. They didn't find anything. Of course they didn't. But a few nights later, a patient went missing. Old man, diabetic, not mobile. Security footage showed his bed empty. Blankets peeled back like someone helped him up. And just before the tape cuts out, there's a faint whistling. I quit a month later, moved to Flagstaff. But some nights, when I'm driving home, and the wind cuts just right, I swear I hear it again. That slow, broken tune drifting across the dark, and I lock my doors tight. Because I know better now. You never follow the whistling, not unless you want to be found by something that's not human anymore. My name is Daniel Whitefeather. I grew up on the Navajo Reservation in Chenal, Arizona, at the edge of the canyons. Our home sat alone on a stretch of red dirt, surrounded by flat, open desert, with the Chuska Mountains in the distance. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me stories. Real stories. Not the kind you'd find in books. Stories about the things that walk at night, he said. You can't fight them like people. You don't look at them too long. And most of all, you don't open the door when they knock. I never really understood why, until the night something came that sounded just like him. I was 24 when my dad passed. Heart attack, quiet, sudden. I inherited the old house, started fixing it up, stayed out there by myself most nights. Nothing but stars and wind for company. One evening, around 10:30, I was out back repairing the fence line when I heard a voice from the front porch. "Danny boy, you out here?" I dropped the hammer. That was my father's voice. Exactly same rough cadence. Same nickname. He'd been dead almost a year. I stood, frozen for a full minute. Then it knocked on the front door 3 times, just like my dad used to knock. 2 quick taps, pause, then a firm third. My legs moved before my brain did. I went to the front of the house. Looked out the PHOL. No one there, but I felt it. Like someone was waiting, right up against the door. No breath, no shuffle, just waiting. I called out, "Who is it?" The voice came again. "Danny, it's me, son. I forgot my boots inside. Let me in." I backed away. I'd buried his boots with him. I grabbed cedar and ash from the kitchen drawer, what my grandmother always told us to keep close. I lit it, whispered the prayer she taught me, and set the ash line in front of the door. Then it knocked again. Harder this time. 3 perfect knocks. I swear the door bent inward a little. Then came the scraping, long, slow drags of what sounded like claws over wood. I heard my father's voice whisper through the cracks. "I'm cold out here, Danny. Don't you miss me?" I didn't speak, didn't breathe. That's when the porch boards creaked. I inched toward the window and peeked. There was something standing on the edge of the shadows. Tall, hunched, wearing my father's face like a poorly stretched mask. Its limbs were too long. Its neck craned sideways like it had been broken and snapped back wrong. And in its left hand, his old leather boots. I ran into the back room, grabbed my dad's old shotgun. Not because I thought I could kill it, but because I needed something in my hands. When I came back, it was gone. Only the smell remained, like rotting hide and burnt hair. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't sleep much for weeks. Later, I went to see an elder, Mary Thatch, who lived near many farms. I told her what happened. She looked at me, dead serious, and said, "That wasn't your father. That was a skinwalker trying on his memory, trying to be invited in." Then she handed me a pouch of corn pollen, ashes, and said, "You survived because you remembered who you are and who your father was. I still live out here, but I don't go outside after dark, and I never answer the door when it knocks, because I know it's still out there, and one night, it might come back with my mother's voice." I was 17 when it happened to me, during a dry October in Tahachi, New Mexico. My older brother Ruben had just come home from basic training. He looked thinner, sharper than I remembered, but still had that same loud laugh and the habit of leaving his boots in the middle of the hallway. That weekend, our parents left for a funeral in Ruben and I stayed behind. He said he didn't feel like being around people. I figured he just wanted some quiet. But what we got that weekend wasn't peace. It was something else. The first night was fine. We stayed up late, watched old tapes, and ate beans and fried bread until we both passed out on the living room floor. The next day, though, Ruben was off. He barely spoke, just stared out the window for hours. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to this weird dragging noise, like someone pulling themselves across the wooden floor. Then a faint knock on the back door, soft, uneven. I figured it was just the wind, but Ruben wasn't in his bed. I found him standing in the kitchen, lights off, eyes wide, knife in his hand. He whispered, "It's here." Before I could ask what he meant, the knock came again, louder. Then I heard something whisper my name, but it didn't sound right. It sounded like someone trying to sound like me. like my voice was being copied, stretched, mimicked. Reuben motioned for me to stay low. I saw it this morning, he said. Across the hill, watching. He didn't explain, just poured salt across every windowsill and drew protection symbols with white ash. That's when we heard it crawl along the side of the house. No footsteps, just dragging, like elbows and knees scraping the dirt. Then came the voice again. Reuben, let me in. It's me, T. That's what Reuben used to call me. A family nickname. No one else knew it. I looked at him, terrified. He whispered, "It's not you. It wears people like skin." We turned off the lights and waited. That thing circled the house for hours. I swear I heard it laughing sometimes. Other times, it sobbed like a child. Then, just before sunrise, it scratched on the window behind us. We didn't turn around. We didn't speak. And finally, it left when our parents got back. We didn't say anything. But Reuben sat me down that night and told me everything. He said one of the drill sergeants at boot camp had told them about skinwalkers, things that could wear the shape of anyone they wanted, if they had enough of your scent or a piece of your body. Reuben remembered that he'd bled into the dirt one morning near the canyon. He thinks that was enough. We never saw it again, but we moved a month later, and to this day, I never speak that nickname out loud, because, if it calls out to me again, I want to know it's not family. One night something happened which I cannot forget. It was during a summer camping trip in northern Arizona, near Canyon de Chelly. I was 21 then, freshly back from college, trying to reconnect with my cousins and clear my head. We pitched our tents just off an old livestock trail near the canyon rim, far enough from town that there was no light but the moon and the flames from our small fire. There were 4 of us, me, my cousin Wes, our younger cousin Bree, and Wes's friend Jamal. None of us were drunk, nobody was high, just stories, canned beans, and the sound of wind brushing the junipers. But around midnight, the wind stopped, completely. Wes was mid-sentence when we all noticed it. No bugs, no rustling, no sound at all. The fire cracked. Bree looked up, her marshmallow stick trembling in her hand. Then Jamal whispered, "Do you hear that?" At first I didn't, but then I caught it, just beneath the breeze that was no longer there, a low clicking sound, like rocks being knocked together. It came from the trees behind us. That's when the air changed, heavier, like something was watching from the dark. Bree leaned close and said, she felt like she was being stared at. I turned with my flashlight and scanned the edge of the trees. Just shadows. Then eyes too low to the ground to be human, too far apart to be a coyote. And they didn't blink. Wes stood up and called out, "Who's there?" The clicking stopped. Then something stepped forward just enough to reflect the firelight. It looked like a man, but its limbs were wrong. Long, bent, crooked, like it had been put together by someone who didn't know how humans worked. Its mouth stretched wide, and I swear it smiled. Then it spoke. "You kids shouldn't be here." It was Wes's voice. Exactly cadence and all. But Wes was right next to me. I grabbed the pouch of ash and cedar my grandmother had made me keep in my backpack. I'd always thought it was just tradition. Never really believed it mattered. I took out a pinch, whispered a protection prayer, and threw it into the fire. The flames burst bright blue for a second, and the thing screeched, stumbling back into the brush. But it didn't run. It crawled, like a spider, arms bending backwards as it vanished into the trees. We packed up immediately and hiked the 2 miles back to the car without speaking. Later, Bree told us it had whispered her name the night before. Said it called to her while she was using the bathroom behind the tent, pretending to be me. That's how it works, they say. It learns you, watches you, then wears you. We all made it home, but I haven't gone camping since, and I never leave the FIRELIGHT. Because some things live in the dark, and they know your name before you even hear theirs. One evening I was dizzy. Not sick, just off. My balance felt strange, like the earth was tilting under my boots. I was standing in my backyard, in the middle of the desert brush near Window Rock, watching the horizon melt into twilight. The sky had turned that deep orange-blue where shadows start stretching longer than they should. My dog Loma, a big mixed shepherd with coyote in her blood, was standing by the fence line, completely still, tail low, ears pinned back. She wouldn't come when I called. That's when I knew something was wrong. It had been a quiet week. My uncle had passed away, and I'd spent most of the day alone after returning from the service. Grief, silence, and desert wind. I thought maybe I was just hearing things when the knocking started, but it wasn't at the front door. It was on the side wall of the house. 3 sharp knocks, like knuckles on drywall from outside. Loma bolted into the brush like she was chasing something. I called and whistled, but she vanished into the junipers. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped toward the sound. As I passed the corner of the house, I saw tracks in the dirt, not paw prints, bare feet. They were large, too wide, and too long to be human, with what looked like claw marks trailing from the toes. I backed up slowly, then I heard it, a voice, from just past the fence. "Loma girl, come here." Come on girl. That was my voice, my exact tone. Even the same whistle I used to call her, but I wasn't saying it. I froze. The flashlight trembled in my hand. I whispered a protection prayer under my breath, one my grandmother taught me long ago, but I'd never actually believed I'd need. Then I saw it. It stepped out from behind a patch of sagebrush, something wearing my shape. Same flannel shirt, same jeans, same hair, but the face, it was wrong. Too stretched. The skin was loose around the eyes, and the jaw hung open, as if it didn't understand how it worked. It tilted its head, copying me, mocking me. Then it said in my voice again, "Loma, come here, girl. I found something." That's when she came charging back, growling low, teeth bared, tail rigid. But she didn't run to me. She lunged at it. It shrieked, this awful, choking sound, like a man screaming underwater, and stumbled backward into the brush. Loma chased it halfway into the dark until I screamed her name. She came back, tail between her legs, trembling, and she wouldn't stop shaking for hours. I burned cedar and sprinkled white ash around the whole house. Didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear that thing in my voice, whispering, "I'm you." In the morning, I found footprints circling the house, but only one set. It had walked around the house 3 times, on 2 legs. People ask why I never let Loma off leash anymore, why I don't camp, why I don't go outside after dusk. I just smile and say, sometimes your reflection doesn't need a mirror. But between you and me, that thing out there, it still remembers me, and I know it's still practicing my voice. When I was young, maybe 10 or 11, I lived with my grandmother in a small house near Chinell, Arizona. She was traditional, still spoke mostly in dine bismod, still burned cedar every morning, still told stories about the old ways, as though they were warnings instead of tales. One evening in late fall, the air turned sharp, the kind of cold that stings your lungs when you breathe too hard. We didn't have a thermostat, just a wood stove that hissed and popped like it was always in conversation with itself. That was the night I saw the man standing at the fence line. He was tall, not freakishly so, but tall enough that it struck me as strange. Dressed in worn clothes, boots too big, coat too small. He stood facing the house, unmoving, hands at his sides. I watched him from the kitchen window while Grandma stirred blue corn mush. She didn't look up when she spoke. "Do not open that door." I hadn't even touched the handle. "Don't even look at it directly," she said. "Just keep your eyes low. He's not here for you, but he's watching." Her voice was low, calm, but full of something I didn't understand back then. Fear, maybe, or recognition. That night, she placed ashes across every window frame and door. She made me sleep in the living room with a satchel of white cornmeal under my pillow. But I didn't sleep, because all night I could hear him just outside. He paced slowly along the wooden fence, dragging something, a stick or bone maybe, along the rails. It made a dull tapping sound, over and over. Tap, tap, tap. Sometimes he stopped. Then I would hear scratching, not on the door, on the walls, like he was trying to trace something around the house. At some point during the night, I must have drifted off. When I woke, the house was ice cold. The fire in the stove had gone out. Grandma was already outside, scattering ashes and mumbling under her breath. There were footprints around the house, bare feet in the frost. I asked her if it was a skinwalker. She didn't answer me at first, just kept her gaze on the horizon. Finally, she said, "Something came looking, something hungry, but it won't come back now." I thought that meant we were safe, but I didn't understand what she really meant. Until years later, it didn't come back to the house, but it followed me, in dreams mostly. Sometimes in that feeling you get when someone's watching, but there's no one there. Once, when I was 16, I saw it again. Not close, but far off, across the wash behind the school. Still tall, still watching. They say pick their prey. Sometimes they hunt, sometimes they just wait. They latch onto bloodlines, they remember names, and I think I made a mistake that first night. When I stared at it too long through the window, Grandma said not to look, but I did, and I think it looked back. I was 17 when it happened to me. We were staying at my uncle's trailer out near Tahachi for the summer. My parents thought the quiet would keep me out of trouble. No signal, no friends, just desert and stars. My brother Leo had just turned 13, and the two of us would hike the trails during the day, then sit up on the roof of the trailer at night, staring at the constellations. One night, everything changed. It started with a whistle, not the wind, an actual whistle, human-tuned. It came from just past the ridge, where the pinyon trees cast long, crooked shadows. Leo was already inside, brushing his teeth, so I figured it was my uncle, or maybe a ranch hand nearby. But then I heard my own name, spoken softly, like someone was calling me into the dark. "Mason, come here." It was Leo's voice, but Leo was inside. I turned, confused, and saw him through the window. He was standing by the sink, brushing his teeth, just like I thought. But the voice outside called again. Same tone, same rhythm. "Mason, hurry." That's when the air turned wrong, heavy, like everything around me was pressing in. I couldn't move. My arms and legs felt like wet sandbags. Then, through the trees, I saw something step forward. It looked like Leo. Same pajamas, same posture, but its arms hung too long, and the way it moved was broken, jerky, like it had learned how to walk by watching a film in reverse. It opened its mouth, too wide, and said again, "Come here, Mason, I found something." That was the moment I knew it wasn't him. It wasn't even human. I slid off the roof, landing hard on my ankle, and scrambled inside, locking the trailer door behind me. Leo saw my face and asked what happened. I pulled him into the back room, without answering, and told him not to come out, no matter what he heard. Then we both heard it. Knocking. 3 slow taps on the door. Let me in. Mason, it's cold. Leo looked at me and whispered, that sounds like me. I nodded, and we waited all night. We heard it circle the trailer, sometimes scratching the aluminum siding, sometimes tapping the windows. Once it even whispered Leo's name, from behind the wall. Just as the sun rose, everything stopped. We peeked outside. Nothing except one long muddy footprint on the steps. Not a shoe print, not bare feet. Something in between. We left that morning. My uncle didn't question it, just nodded, burned cedar in every corner, and made us pour salt and ash along the property line. We never talked about it again, but sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake up to a whistle. One I haven't heard in years, and sometimes I hear my brother's voice, even when he's not home. One night something happened which I cannot forget. I was 24 and working night shifts as a security guard at a construction site outside Gallup, New Mexico. The site was surrounded by desert brush and empty land. They were building a new set of homes, but at night, it felt like I was the only person left in the world. I'd drive out just before sunset, park my car near the trailer office, and spend most of the night walking the fence line with a flashlight and thermos full of cheap coffee. Most nights were the same, cold, windy, and uneventful. But one night, it changed. It was just past 2 a.m. when I noticed the motion detector light at the back of the property flicker on. Nothing unusual at first. Sometimes jack or coyotes would trigger it. But this time, when I walked over to check it out, the sensor light turned off before I got there. I figured it burned out. I was about to turn around when I noticed something in the dirt. Eyes, not glowing, not reflecting, just watching, from inside a shallow burrow near the fence line. I stepped closer and knelt down. The eyes didn't blink, they didn't move, they just stared at me, and then something spoke. You don't belong here. I jerked backward and almost dropped my flashlight. The voice was raspy, low, like it came from under gravel, but the mouth never moved. There was no mouth, just those eyes. Leave now. You still can. I stumbled away, radioed the other guard, who worked the morning shift, and told him I was heading home early. I didn't even wait for a response. I jumped in my car and drove off without even logging out. The next morning, I came back after the sun was fully up. The site looked normal, but when I went to the fence line where I saw the eyes, the burrow was gone. In its place were tracks, not human, not animal, something with elongated toes and hooves, like it couldn't decide what it was supposed to be. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? But that wasn't the end of it. 2 nights later, I was back on duty. I had convinced myself I imagined it. Maybe stress, maybe lack of sleep. I told myself over and over that it was just the desert playing tricks. At 2:11 a.m. exactly, the sensor light turned on again. This time, I didn't walk toward it. I just watched, and what I saw still makes my skin crawl to this day. There was a figure, thin, crouched, moving along the dirt with impossible speed. It would stop, tilt its head toward the trailer, then vanish and reappear a few feet closer. It was naked, hairless, with skin the color of ash and limbs too long for its torso. Every movement it made was like a glitch, like watching a puppet with a broken string. Then it stood and spoke again, in my own voice. You don't belong here. I turned off the lights, sat in the dark, clutching a pocket knife like it could save me from whatever that was. The figure didn't come closer, but it didn't leave. Either it stood there until dawn. I quit the job that week. Didn't give a notice, just stopped showing up. They could keep the uniform, I've driven past that site a few times since. The homes are finished now. Families live there. Kids ride bikes down the cul-de-sac like nothing ever happened. But I wonder if they've seen it. The thing that watches from the dirt dot. The thing that wears your voice like it's trying on skin. When I was young, maybe 8 or 9, I used to love riding with my dad when he made deliveries to the remote trading posts scattered across the Navajo Nation. He owned a small box truck and hauled everything from canned food to tools, tires, and livestock feed. I think he liked having me along because I didn't talk much. We just listened to the radio and watched the horizon stretch endlessly across red earth and low mesas. It was peaceful until that one delivery near Burnside. That was the day something attached itself to me. We arrived just before sunset. The sky was bleeding orange and purple. The trading post was empty, except for the old man who ran the place. A quiet guy named Mr. Sozy. My dad backed into the loading dock while I wandered around the front, where shelves of turquoise jewelry and dry goods lined the porch. That's when I saw her, a woman standing at the edge of the road. She was barefoot, with long black hair that covered her face. Her dress was ragged, full of holes, and she had one hand stretched toward me, like she was reaching, not waving. But something in my gut twisted instantly. I didn't move. I see OULDN single quotes. TA Mr. Sozy must have seen her too, because he rushed out and slammed the screen door shut. Do not speak to her, he said sharply. Then he walked straight past me, picked up a handful of dirt, and threw it toward her, while muttering something under his breath. She vanished, just like that, like smoke curling away into nothing. On the ride home, I asked my dad who she was. He said nothing, not at first. Then he said, some spirits don't die, they just change, and some of them hate the living. I didn't sleep that night, not because of what I saw, but because of what I heard. It started as a whisper, from under the bed. My name, Daniel. It wasn't my mom's voice. It wasn't my dad's. It sounded just like the woman outside the trading post. For the next few weeks, the whispering got worse. She'd call to me from outside my window, even on the second floor. She'd tap the glass with long fingers and smile with teeth too white, too sharp. My parents thought I was having nightmares, but I knew better. One night I tried to ignore her. I pulled the blanket over my head and blocked my ears. That's when I felt the weight at the foot of my bed, slowly shifting, crawling. When I dared to look, I saw her crawling up the wall, head twisted backward, still whispering my name like a prayer and a curse. I screamed. My dad burst in. The room was empty. He finally believed me that night. He called a medicine man the next morning, a real one, not someone who just said the right words. We sat in a circle, burned cedar, corn pollen, prayer after prayer. The medicine man said she was not human anymore, that she was a kind of skinwalker, once a woman, maybe even a healer, who turned dark long ago and became a shadow of herself. He said she followed me because I looked at her too long, because I noticed her. The ceremony went on until nightfall. The air grew cold inside the house. Doors creaked without wind. Lights flickered at one point. The fire cracked and I swear I saw her face in the flame, smiling. Then it was gone. I haven't seen her since, but every now and then, when I drive past an old trading post, I get that tightness in my chest again. And I look down at my arm, at the faded ash-colored fingerprint she left on my wrist that night. It's still there, and it never goes away. One evening, I was dizzy from working double shifts at the factory. I finally crawled into bed around midnight, hoping to sleep off the exhaustion. I lived alone in a small cabin on the outskirts of a Navajo reservation, a place where the land seemed to stretch forever, and sometimes it felt like the shadows did too. I wasn't expecting company. I woke up suddenly, eyes wide, because there was a noise outside my bedroom window. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the usual rustle of coyotes or the soft tapping of pine needles. It was breathing, heavy, slow breathing. I blinked and tried to convince myself I was dreaming, but then I saw it. A tall figure crouched just outside the glass, no eyes, just empty sockets where they should have been. Its skin looked like cracked earth, dry, dark, and peeling. The creature's head was twisted at a sharp angle, almost unnatural. It raised one hand and pressed it flat against the window. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. It didn't say a word. It didn't move for what felt like hours, just stared. After what seemed like an eternity, it suddenly vanished. No footsteps, no sounds, just the cold that lingered in the air after it disappeared. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, I found deep scratches on the outside of the window frame, long jagged gouges, as if something was trying to get in. Later that day, my neighbor told me about a series of strange disappearances in the area. People vanishing near the same time I saw the figure. He mentioned something his grandfather said about beings that take on shapes to terrorize and sometimes replace their victims. I don't know if it was that creature or something worse, but I know one thing. When the shape came to my window that night, it wasn't just passing through, it was looking for something, and I'm afraid it might come back. I was 15 when it happened to me. We lived in a trailer tucked deep in the desert outside Chino, Arizona. Just me, my mom, my little brother, and our dog, Chewy. He was a tough old mutt, part shepherd, part something wilder, and he never let anything get close to our home without raising hell. That's why, the night Chewy went silent, I knew something was wrong. It started just after midnight. I was still awake, scrolling on my old cracked phone with one earbud in. Chewy always slept right outside my window, tied to a post under the porch awning. I usually heard him rustling around, snorting in his sleep, or barking at coyotes in the distance. But that night, nothing, not a single sound, just a strange, dry shuffling, like someone dragging a dead branch across gravel. I pulled the curtain back, expecting to see Chewy pacing, but he wasn't there at first. I thought maybe his leash snapped, but then I noticed something worse. A long smear of blood across the dirt and two sets of prints. One was Chewy's, the other didn't make sense. It looked like bare feet, but they weren't human. Each print had too many toes, spaced too far apart, and there were sharp drag marks in the dirt, like claws. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside, calling his name. Nothing answered me. Not Chewy, not the wind. But then I heard it from the edge of the brush line, maybe 20 feet away, a deep, choking growl. And then, Chewy's bark, except it wasn't him. It sounded like him, but too raspy, too slow, like someone trying to imitate him. That's when I saw it. Something standing just inside the tree line. It was tall, almost man-shaped, but the proportions were all wrong. Its limbs were too long, the arms too thin, and its face, God, I'll never forget that face. It was Chewy's. Not his real one, but like a mask, sagging and torn, worn like a trophy over something else, and it barked at me. That same broken, robotic bark. I ran inside, slammed the door, and shoved the couch in front of it. My mom came rushing out of her room, asking what was wrong. I couldn't even speak. I just pointed at the window. She went pale. She grew up on the reservation. She knew the stories. She knew the rules. She said a prayer under her breath, grabbed cedar ash, and sprinkled it across the doors and windows. We didn't sleep. That night, Chewy never came back. We found what was left of his leash, chewed clean through. No body, no bones. Just that trail of blood and those impossible tracks. My uncle came the next day to perform a cleansing. He burned herbs and spoke in Navajo while walking the perimeter. Then he pulled me aside and said, "You never call for it. You never whistle at night. And you never look too long into the trees." I still live in Arizona, but I moved closer to the city every now and then. When I take late walks or hear a dog barking out of place, I get that chill down my spine again, and I wonder if it remembers me. One night something happened which I cannot forget. I was house-sitting for my aunt in the dusty outskirts of Farmington, New Mexico. She had gone to visit her daughter in Colorado and needed someone to feed the goats, water the plants, and keep an eye on the place for a week. I didn't mind. Free food, no rent, and I could bring my Xbox. The house was small, old, built low to the ground, on short concrete risers with a crawl space underneath. She warned me not to go down there. I wish I had listened. It started on the third night. I woke up to the sound of footsteps beneath the floor, heavy, slow, deliberate. At first I thought it was the goats outside. Maybe one had gotten loose. But these steps were too rhythmic, too focused, moving directly under my bedroom, back and forth, back and forth. I held my breath and waited. They stopped. The next morning, I went outside and checked under the house. I didn't go in, just shined my flashlight through the grating. I didn't see anything, but I noticed something weird. The vent cover had been unscrewed. The metal bolts lay in a neat pile on the dirt. Something had been inside that afternoon. I called my aunt and told her. She got quiet, real quiet. Then she said, "Just leave a line of corn pollen by the door, and cedar ash if you can find some. Do not go under the house. You understand me?" I said yes, but I didn't understand. That night, I made the line. I stayed up watching a movie to keep my mind off it. Then I heard it again, the same footsteps. Only this time, it didn't stay under the floor. I swear I heard it breathing through the vents. Slow, rattling inhales like it had lungs full of dust and bone. Then it said something, not in English, but it sounded like my name, garbled, croaked, like a throat full of rocks. RRR, Ryan. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I finally snapped. I couldn't take not knowing. I grabbed my flashlight, a crowbar, and crawled under the house. The air was thick and still. Cobwebs clung to my face. I couldn't see more than 5 feet in front of me. That's when I saw the prints, bare human feet, but wrong. The toes were longer, claw marks at the end, and they circled a spot near the center of the crawl space where the dirt had been dug up. I approached slowly. There, in the middle of the clearing, was a mask. It looked like skin, dried and stitched, with hollow eye holes and a mouth stretched into a permanent, snarling grin. And right beside it, my photo. One I didn't know existed. It was me, asleep in bed. I screamed and scrambled backward, hitting my head on the wooden beam above me. When I got out, the sun was already setting. That night, I didn't hear anything. I didn't sleep either. I just waited for something to return. My aunt came back 3 days early. She took one look at me and said, "You went under, didn't you?" I nodded. She didn't get mad. She just walked outside, lit cedar and sweetgrass, and began walking around the house, chanting. I never asked what she said. I didn't want to know, but I noticed that night, the air finally felt still. Years later, I still think about that photo. Who or what took it? And why was it buried with a mask? The Skinwalker stories aren't just tales. Not out here sometimes. They don't want to hurt you. Sometimes they just want to wear you. When I was young, I spent summers with my grandparents on their ranch outside Gallup, New Mexico. The land was quiet, open, with rust-colored dirt stretching to the edge of the horizon. Behind the ranch was a dried-up wash, a deep ravine that only filled with water during monsoon season. Everyone called it Dead Man's Run. I never knew why, until the summer I turned 12. My grandpa was old-school Navajo, never one for bedtime stories, but full of warnings. Don't whistle at night. Don't look toward the trees after sunset. Never answer if someone calls your name in the dark. At the time, I thought he was just trying to scare me, but I learned real fast. Those weren't stories, they were survival rules. One night, we lost power during a storm. The wind came in strong, rattling the windows and bending the old screen door until it shrieked. I sat by the oil lamp reading comics, trying to ignore the howling outside. That's when I heard it, a whistle high-pitched, mimicking the tune I had been humming earlier that day. It came from outside, down in the wash. I looked at my grandpa. He froze, then whispered, "Turn that lamp off." We sat in complete darkness. The whistling came again, closer now, more confident, still mimicking me. Then came the voice, my voice, from the wash. "Grandpa, it's me. Come help me." I felt cold spread through my whole body. I was right there, in the room, and yet something outside was pretending to be me. Grandpa grabbed his old shotgun and sprinkled ash around the door, muttering a prayer I'd never heard before. He didn't go outside. He didn't even look out the window. He just waited, whispering over and over, "Don't let it in, don't let it in." The next morning the wind had calmed. We walked to the wash together. The dirt was still wet from the storm. That's when I saw the prints, human barefoot, but they led the wrong direction. Up the walls of the ravine, like someone had climbed straight out, using nothing but hands and feet. At the top of the wash, scratched into the mud, was a message. "Next time, I'll bring your voice." I never whistled again, not once. Even now, decades later, I still catch myself tensing when I hear someone do it on the street or in a movie, because I know what happens when something else learns your sound. I was 17 when it happened to me. My Uncle George owned a small cattle ranch near Tuba City, Arizona. That summer, he hired me to help out, feeding the animals, fixing the fences, checking water lines. In return, I got to ride his old dirt bike across the land and keep whatever jackrabbits I caught with my .22 rifle. The work was hard, but I loved it until the calves started disappearing. At first we thought it was coyotes, or maybe a mountain lion. It's not uncommon out there, especially during dry years when food gets scarce. But the thing was, there was never any blood, no signs of a struggle, just a small hoofprint trail leading into the brush. And then, nothing gone, like the earth swallowed them up. Uncle George didn't say much. He just muttered, "Something's wrong," and set up one of those old trail cams on a fence post overlooking the pasture. We left it up for 3 nights. On the 4th morning, I rode out to grab the SD card. I didn't even make it back to the house before stopping dead in my tracks, because I had seen something on that camera that froze my blood. There were 5 clips. The first 3 showed nothing, just cows grazing and some bats flitting by the lens. The 4th clip, that's where it started. It was about 2:11 a.m. All the cows suddenly lifted their heads at once. staring toward the same part of the fence line. Something was moving just outside the frame. The air looked strange, like heat waves on asphalt. Then, one of the cows took off running, and something chased it into the frame. It looked like a man, but no man runs like that. On all fours, hunched and twisted, elbows bent the wrong way. Its back legs moved like a coyote's, but its arms were long, like a human crawling fast. And its head was wrong. Too big, too pale, like a skull wrapped in waxy skin. The fifth clip, I almost threw up watching it. It was just a close-up of the creature, standing straight, almost human, but not quite. Its skin looked stretched. Its chest didn't rise or fall. And worst of all, it was wearing a face. Not like a mask, more like someone had peeled the skin off a person and laid it over this thing's skull. The eye holes didn't line up right, and it was smiling. I ran straight to my uncle and showed him. He didn't even blink, just said, "Delete it now." I asked him what it was. He looked at me and said, "That's not for us to name, but it's been here long before fences." That night, he lit cedar, sprinkled ash around the barn, and said something in Dine I didn't understand. We didn't lose any more calves after that. I never went back to that ranch. He sold it a year later, said the land had turned sour. I don't know what I saw, but I know what I didn't see. There were no tracks, no blood, and no one, not even the coyotes, came near that pasture again. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see that face, that thing, wearing someone else's skin. And I wonder if whoever it took is still out there, watching from behind its stolen smile. One evening I was dizzy, not from sickness or exhaustion, but from something deeper. A kind of pressure in the air that made my ears ring and my skin crawl. I was sitting on the front porch of my childhood home in Lucachokai, Arizona, staring out at the desert. The sun was gone, but the sky still held the last orange line of daylight. My younger brother, Eli, hadn't come back from checking the horses. That's when I knew something was wrong. It was just supposed to be a short walk, 15 minutes, tops. The corral wasn't even that far, just past the cottonwoods and down a shallow slope. But when the sun dipped fully behind the mountains, I felt it, a wrongness, like the shadows were holding their breath, and so was the land. I grabbed a flashlight and started toward the corral. As soon as I passed the cottonwoods, the world felt muted, like the wind had stopped, like something ancient had just turned its attention toward me. I called for Eli. No answer. At the base of the slope, I found his flashlight, still on, lying in the dirt. Its beam pointed at nothing. There were footprints, his, and something else's. Longer strides, barefoot, heavy, and clawed. They circled him, then veered off into the brush. I followed. I know I shouldn't have, but he was my little brother. I wasn't going to leave him. The path twisted through juniper and pine trees, down into a ravine I had never noticed before, and then I heard it. Footsteps behind me, too many, too fast. I spun around with my flashlight, and caught something just at the edge of the beam. A figure, thin, tall. Its head was wrong, too wide at the top, tapering at the chin. It crouched when I pointed the light at it, like it hated being seen. Then it mimicked me, perfectly. "Eli, Eli, where are you?" But it wasn't my voice, it was my mother's. I ran. I don't remember how long. I tripped twice, sliced my arm open on a branch, dropped the flashlight. When I got back to the house, I was bleeding and shaking. My parents called the tribal police. They searched all night. They found nothing but Eli's boot. A week later, we had a gathering. Elders burned cedar and said prayers. One of them, a medicine man named Ben Yacher, sat with me and asked for details. When I told him, he just looked down and said quietly, "That wasn't your brother you heard. Not anymore. It's been 8 years. We never found his body. But every so often, I hear tapping on my window, late at night. Always just 3 knocks. Then silence, and sometimes, I hear my brother's voice whisper my name, but I don't answer, because I remember what Ben said. They can wear our skin, they can wear our voice, but they can't wear our soul." When I was young, maybe 10 or 11, I used to love staying at my cousin Derek's house out in Shiprock, New Mexico. His family lived on a small patch of land near the edge of the Navajo Nation, where the desert stretched flat and red for miles. There were no neighbors close by, just old fences, sagebrush, and silence. One summer, something started watching us, and it started with a dog. We first saw it one evening, just sitting outside the barbed wire fence. A huge black dog with a thick neck, long limbs, and white eyes. No shine, no pupils, just white dot. It didn't bark, didn't move, just stared. Derek's dad threw a rock at it, told us not to look at it anymore, and shut the blinds. That night, something scratched at the front door, 3 slow drags, then silence, then tapping on the window. Above my head, I didn't sleep. Neither did Derek. We kept the blanket pulled over our heads, whispering to each other in the dark. In the morning, there were no tracks, no sign of the dog, but a small dead rabbit had been placed right on the front step. Its eyes were missing. A week went by with no sign of the dog. We thought maybe it moved on. Then Derek's mom called us in for dinner one night, and we saw it again, right by the shed, standing upright, like a man. The shape of it was wrong. Its back to long shoulders, arched, head tilted, like it didn't know how to carry itself. But its eyes, still white, still staring. That night, Derek's dad sat us both down and told us not to speak its name, not to call out into the night, not to talk about it after dark. He burned cedar and spread ash in a perfect line along every windowsill. But around 2 a.m., the dog came back. This time, we heard it speak. Not bark. Speak, in our grandma's voice. "Come outside, boys. I brought fry bread." I wanted to believe it, but I knew our grandma lived 2 towns over, and she wasn't coming to visit until the weekend. We stayed frozen, too scared to even breathe. Then came the scratching again, longer this time, desperate, and then it laughed. Not a bark, not a growl, a laugh, like someone pretending to be human, but getting it just a little wrong. The next morning, the front door was wide open, the line of ash broken. Derek's dad didn't say a word. He just packed us into the truck and took us to stay with our aunt in Gallup for the rest of the summer. He never told us what he saw that night, but he sold the house a month later, and he's never gone back. I still have dreams about that dog. Sometimes it's sitting at the foot of my bed. Sometimes it stands at the edge of a hallway, and sometimes I hear it outside the window, scratching, waiting, whispering in a voice I loved once. But I know better now. No matter what it says, I never open the door. One night something happened which I cannot forget. My friend Rosie and I had just left a house party in Gallup, New Mexico. It was around 11 p.m., and the air was thick with desert heat. We were both a little buzzed, not from drinking, but from laughing too hard, singing old songs in her beat. Up Honda, as we made our way back toward Chinle. To save time. Rosie suggested we take the service road that cut through the mesas instead of the highway. That decision still haunts me. At first, it felt fun, like we were teenagers again, blasting music, windows down, dirt flying behind us, but about 15 minutes in, everything got quiet, too quiet, no bugs, no wind. Even the engine sounded like it was muffled. Then we saw something up ahead, a shape, standing in the middle of the road. Rosie slowed the car. It looked like a man, tall, thin, shirtless, but his skin was pale, almost gray, and something about his limbs looked too long. He didn't move, just stood there, so still. I thought he might be a statue. Then he turned, just his head, snapped it toward us like an animal hearing a sound. His eyes were white, not glowing, just white. Rosie panicked and tried to reverse, but the tires spun out in the dirt. That's when it started running fast on all fours. But wrong. Its arms bent backwards, knees wide, body twisting like it didn't belong inside itself. It leaped onto the hood and stared at us through the windshield. Its face looked like it had once been human, but it was stretched, distorted, like someone had worn it too long. Then it opened its mouth and spoke. "I know your names," I screamed. Rosie hit the gas, and somehow the tires caught traction. The thing rolled off the hood, and we tore down the dirt road like the devil himself was chasing us. When we hit the pavement of the main highway, Rosie didn't stop until we were under streetlights again. We didn't talk for a full 10 minutes, just sat in silence, shaking. We got back to Chinnell around midnight. Rosie was pale, silent. The next day, she wouldn't answer my texts, or the next. Her mom called me, frantic. Rosie had locked herself in her room and wouldn't come out. When they finally got the door open, she was gone, window wide open, no footprints, just 3 claw marks across the inside of her bedroom door. The police called it a runaway, but I know what I saw, and I know that thing knew her name. I drive the long way now, always, even if it takes twice as long. Because once you've seen something like that, something that can speak your name in a voice that doesn't blink or breathe, you never take shortcuts through the dark again. I was 21 when it happened to me. That summer, I had taken a seasonal job with the Park Service near Canyon de Chelly in Arizona. It was mostly boring, trail maintenance, giving directions to tourists, checking for fires. I liked the solitude. I liked being far from everything, even cell signal. Until the night I heard the voice calling my name, and realized I wasn't alone out there. I had set up camp near the canyon rim, just a few hundred feet from Spider Rock. It was late June, still, warm after dark, and the stars looked like they'd been splattered across the whole sky around midnight. I woke up suddenly, not to a sound exactly, but a sensation, like something was standing just outside my tent, watching. I stayed still, listening. Then I heard it. A voice, soft, low, and completely calm. "Daniel, come out. It's safe now." It was my mother's voice, but she'd been dead 3 years. I didn't move, not a muscle then. It called again, same voice. "Daniel, I need your help." It was almost perfect, the tone, the cadence, but something was off, too smooth, too clean, like someone trying really hard to mimic something they'd only ever heard through a tape recorder. I finally reached for my flashlight and unzipped the tent flap a crack. Nothing, no footsteps, no movement, just quiet desert and moonlight. Still, I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just waited and listened, and whatever it was, it waited too. The next morning, I found prints in the dirt, but not human ones. They looked like hooves, split, long, deep, like a goat or a deer. But there were also claw marks in the dirt beside them, as if the creature sometimes crawled. The ranger I worked with, Marvin, an older dying man, noticed I was pale and jumpy the next day. When I told him, he looked at me real serious, asked me to describe the voice. When I said it sounded like my mom, he nodded once. They use what you miss, he said. What you ache for. He told me to never answer again, never speak to it, and to pack my things before nightfall. I left that evening and never went back to that part of the canyon, but I've heard the voice 2 more times since then, once outside my apartment window, in Flagstaff, once over the phone, no number, just static. Each time, it starts with, "Daniel, are you there?" Each time, it still sounds like her, and every time, it gets a little closer to perfect. When I was young, maybe 8 or 9, I used to spend weekends with my Uncle Ray on his ranch in northeastern Arizona. He lived alone, kept sheep, and didn't talk much, but I liked it out there. How quiet it was, how the stars looked like a blanket full of pinholes. That was also the year I learned to be afraid of the dark in a way I've never really shaken. It started with a knock on the window. I was sleeping in the spare room, tucked under 3 blankets, when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. The window was right by my head. Just a thin pane of glass, and a screen between me and whatever was out there. I listened, and then came a voice. "You awake, little man?" It was soft, almost playful, but it wasn't Uncle Ray. I didn't answer. I just pulled the blanket up to my nose. But the tapping started again, slower this time. Tap. Wait. Tap. Come open the window. Just want to see you. My whole body went cold. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. But then the voice changed. It shifted. It turned into my mom's voice. "Honey, open up. I'm out here. I need you." Only my mom wasn't anywhere near the ranch. She was 5 hours away. Back in Holbrook, I finally screamed. Uncle Ray came running, shotgun in hand. But by the time he got there, whatever it was had already gone. We found the screen ripped clean off, and below the window, bare footprints in the dirt, but not normal ones. These toes were long, too long, like claws. The heel was shaped wrong, almost backward. Uncle Ray made me sleep in his room for the rest of the weekend. The next morning, he walked the perimeter of the house, mumbling prayers in Dine, and sprinkling crushed ash in a circle. He wouldn't tell me what he was saying, only that it was protection. Before I left that Sunday, he bent down to my level and looked me right in the eye. "If anything ever calls to you at night," he said, "no matter whose voice it wears, don't answer. You understand?" I nodded, and I've remembered that ever since. Now I'm 30. I live in a completely different state, different house, different life. But last month, I woke up to a soft knocking on my bedroom window. Tap, 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 and a voice I hadn't heard in 20 years whispered, "Little man, are you still awake?" The apartment was stale, filled with the scent of something between dust and musty linens. Not terrible, but not pleasant either. As soon as I stepped inside, I was hit by the quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your ears. It was unsettling, to say the least. The place was small, but cluttered, with remnants of a life that had been abandoned abruptly. Clothes were strewn across the floor, magazines and newspapers piled in corners, and dishes were still in the sink. I took a deep breath, letting the gravity of the situation settle in. This was someone's entire life, frozen in time, and it was my job to unravel it. I began by clearing the trash. Fast food wrappers, empty soda cans, and old mail made up the bulk of it. Every now and then, I'd come across something more personal, a photograph, a love letter, or a handwritten grocery list. I couldn't help but feel like I was intruding, peeling back layers of someone's existence. Yet I knew this was why the girl had hired me, to give her the space to grieve, without the burden of these memories. As I moved to the bedroom, I found a small box under the bed. It was old, wooden, and locked. My curiosity got the best of me, and I searched for something to open it with. After some time, I found a small key in the top drawer of the nightstand. It fit perfectly into the lock, and with a soft click, the lid opened. Inside was a collection of letters, old and worn, some stained with what looked like tears. There were photos, too, of the girl and her mother, smiling and carefree, of her as a baby, and of a man I assumed was her father. But beneath all that was something I hadn't expected. A diary. It was small, with a leather cover, and the pages were filled with neat, looping handwriting. I shouldn't have read it. I knew that. But something compelled me to turn the first page. March 14th. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm losing myself. I see her in the mirror sometimes. Not me, but her. My mother. She used to stand in front of this very same mirror, brushing her hair just like I do now. But when I look, it's her eyes staring back at me, not mine. Am I going crazy? I think I might be. I hear her too, at night. Just a whisper, but it's enough to keep me awake. Enough to make me wonder if she's really gone. I paused, my heart beating a little faster. I shouldn't have been reading this. It wasn't mine to know, but I couldn't stop. I flipped to another entry. April 2nd. The dreams are getting worse. I see her standing at the foot of my bed, just staring. She doesn't say anything, but I know she wants something. What did I do wrong? Why is she haunting me? I haven't slept in days. I feel like I'm falling apart. Maybe I deserve this. Maybe I'm the reason she's stuck. Maybe I'm the reason she's still here. I quickly closed the diary and put it back in the box, my hands trembling slightly. The girl had never mentioned anything about her mother being like this. But then again, why would she? I felt a deep pang of guilt for having invaded such a private part of her life. But now, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this job than just clearing out an apartment. It took a few hours, but eventually the apartment was starting to look, well, habitable again. The cat, now fed and slightly more relaxed, was following me closely, his curiosity piqued by every rustling bag and creaking cabinet. I found myself talking to him like he understood, maybe because I needed the distraction. "You're lucky I found you, buddy," I muttered while wiping down the kitchen counters. "I don't know how long you'd have lasted on your own." He meowed, either in agreement or because he wanted more food. Either way, it was comforting to have the company. When the kitchen and living room were mostly cleared of trash, I took a moment to breathe. My back ached, and the smell of the apartment still lingered in my nose, despite the mask. The cat had wandered back to the couch, curling up as if he'd claimed the spot. I'd have to come back another day to go through the sentimental items. The photographs, letters, and personal belongings that were scattered around. But for now, I had done enough. The apartment was starting to reveal a story, one that felt eerily familiar. I knew the girl, Amy, had a strained relationship with her mother. The way she had spoken about her, cold, detached, it was like she was talking about a stranger, not the woman who raised her. The desperate way she wanted nothing to do with the cat, as if it was some lingering remnant of a painful memory, unsettled me. What had happened in this apartment? What secrets did it hold that Amy wanted buried, along with her mother's things? As I packed up for the day, I couldn't help but glance at the diary I had found earlier. It was still sitting in the small box beneath the bed, as if waiting for me to open it again. I didn't though. Not yet. I had a feeling that once I started reading, I'd be dragged into something deeper than I'd expected. Before leaving, I scooped up the cat, who protested with a soft hiss before settling in my arms. "Don't worry, little guy. You're coming with me," I said softly. He didn't seem to mind too much. Maybe he knew that things were about to get better. Or maybe he just knew he wouldn't be alone anymore. As I walked out of the apartment, locking the door behind me. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. There were still too many unanswered questions. The cat curled up in the passenger seat of my car, and as I drove away, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets that apartment was hiding, and whether I was ready to uncover them. I sat there, for a moment, digesting the last note. The creature she mentioned, was it the cat? Lucky, now snuggled up in my apartment, blissfully unaware of the bizarre reverence with which this woman had regarded him. I shivered, not just from the strangeness of it all, but because the tone of these notes had taken a much darker turn. This woman had clearly descended into some deep, religious delusion. The codes, the symbols, the ciphers, all of it pointed to someone who was unraveling. And yet, there was a level of certainty in her words that made my skin crawl. She believed with every fiber of her being that she was serving a higher purpose. The idea that someone could live in this level of isolation, cut off from reality, while still functioning enough to maintain a facade of normalcy. Well, it unsettled me. The radio crackled again, just as I reached for another note. This time, I jumped, half expecting it to start spitting out another cryptic message, but it remained silent. I glared at it, unnerved. That thing was going off way too often for coincidence. A low hum filled the room, barely noticeable, but just enough to raise the hairs on the back of my neck. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Maybe it was the tension of reading these unhinged ramblings. Maybe it was the faint smudges on the windows. Whatever it was, I felt it. The room felt colder, as if some invisible presence had entered and was now watching over my shoulder. I glanced over at the pile of notes, feeling hesitant to continue, but also knowing I had to push through. There was something in this room, something hidden in these papers, that I needed to uncover. I picked up the next note. The false prophets walk among us. It began abruptly, without the usual preamble of her devotion to God. This one felt different, almost as if she had been interrupted mid-thought. I saw one today, walking by the house. I know they come to tempt me, to lure me away from the Lord's path, but I will not falter. They will burn with the rest of the unworthy when the time comes. I have His word, His protection. I must prepare for the final days, when the earth will be cleansed, and only the righteous will rise from the ashes. My heart raced as I read those words. This wasn't just about some religious obsession anymore. She truly believed the end was coming, and soon. The false prophets she mentioned, were they just passers-by, neighbors, or perhaps the kids I thought were messing with her? Another thought crossed my mind, one I didn't want to entertain but couldn't shake. What if those agents of the devil were anyone who had tried to help her? Doctors, family members, maybe even Amy herself. It would explain why Amy had distanced herself so much. The coldness in her voice, her reluctance to even acknowledge her mother's life, it all made sense now. She must have witnessed the deterioration firsthand, powerless to stop it. I continued to sift through the remaining notes, each more frantic than the last. There were detailed instructions about preparing for the apocalypse, stockpiling food, reinforcing the house, and keeping out the unworthy. The handwriting became sloppier, less controlled, and the sentences fragmented, jumping from topic to topic with increasing paranoia. Then, as I reached the bottom of the pile, I found one last note. This one was different, crumpled, as if hastily written and discarded in a moment of clarity. I fear I have been wrong. I paused, my fingers trembling as I unfolded it fully. I have followed His word, but I hear something else now. It whispers. When I try to pray, it tells me things I do not want to hear. Horrible things. It tells me that I am not worthy, that I have been abandoned. I know this is a test, but I am so afraid. Lord, please, do not leave me. I will serve you faithfully until the end. But please, do not leave me in the dark. There was no signature, no date, nothing to indicate when she had written it, but the desperation in her words was palpable. This was someone at the edge, hanging on by a thread, and it was clear that she had lost the battle. I folded the note and placed it gently back into the pile, my mind racing. The house felt different now, heavier, as if the weight of her delusions had imprinted themselves on the very walls. I needed to finish this job, but part of me wanted to leave and never return. The rational part of me knew that there were no ghosts here, no lingering spirits, but the emotional part, the part that had spent hours wading through this woman's deepest fears and madness, wasn't so sure. I gathered my things, casting one last glance at the radio. It was silent now. Still, the air felt thick with the remnants of something unspoken, something unfinished. Lucky was curled up in the corner when I got home, oblivious to everything. As I scratched his head and sat down beside him, I couldn't help but wonder what it must have been like for him, stuck in that apartment, alone, with the madness of his owner, waiting for food that may never come, and yet he had survived. I thought about the woman, her notes, and the apocalyptic visions she had spent her last days fixating on. Was there something she knew that I didn't? Or was it all just the tragic descent of a mind lost to illness? I still don't have an answer. All I know is that some places, some people, leave marks on the world long after they're gone. And sometimes, those marks are too deep to ever be fully erased. But for now, Lucky and I had each other. And maybe, that was enough to keep the dark at bay. As I finished recounting the events surrounding Teresa's house and her obsessive delusions, I couldn't help but feel the weight of her story lingering. It had taken me a while to get it all down, probably because I hadn't revisited those memories in such depth for a long time. It's funny, well, not funny in the literal sense, but even though I've cleared countless homes since Teresa's house still sticks with me. That radio, for one thing, has become almost a symbol of my work. I'll admit, I probably should have tossed it the day it nearly blew out my eardrums, but something told me to keep it, to honor Teresa's memory. A lot of people, if they had been in my shoes, would have thrown everything in the dumpster, or at least handed it off to Amy and washed their hands of it. But that's not what I do. I'm not sure what I expected when I kept the radio. Part of me thought it might help me make sense of everything. Her notes, her delusions, the strange circumstances surrounding her death. I figured maybe, just maybe, there'd be something more to discover if I kept it around. But the truth, every time it flickers to life, with that preacher's voice spouting about sin and damnation, or worse, those soft, calming words from a woman I never knew, it just makes me wonder if Teresa's spirit, or something else, is still tied to it. I've had friends tell me that I should get rid of the whole collection, museum as I call it now, before something worse happens, but I can't. Not out of fear, but because it feels like these items, these relics of people's lives, need to be remembered, even if no one else cares. I suppose it's a way for me to keep a piece of them alive, to give meaning to the chaos they left behind. And while the radio hasn't done anything as dramatic as that first screeching episode in a while, it's always there, that crackle, that subtle hum when everything else is quiet. It reminds me that I'm not just clearing out junk. I'm piecing together lives, unraveling stories that no one else may ever hear. So, that's the story of Teresa. It was my first big job, and one that marked the beginning of a strange path I've been walking ever since. If anyone's curious about more of the stories I've gathered, well, I've got plenty, from the seemingly mundane to the downright bizarre. There's no shortage of secrets buried in the clutter of people's lives. And hey, if the radio kicks on again tonight with one of those fire and brimstone sermons, I might just listen. After all, I've learned that sometimes the strangest things have the most to teach us. I had to pause after reading that entry. It was one thing to go through Alan's journals from the early days, when he was struggling with delusions and hallucinations, following the deaths of his loved ones. Back then, his mind was fractured, fragile, and desperate for some kind of solace in the face of all that tragedy. But this was something else. years of recovery, a family of his own, and now this resurgence of the black-eyed figures. What struck me most wasn't just the terror of seeing his daughters at the door, calling to him with those same voices, but how that encounter reopened something he had buried deep. I've read enough accounts of strange phenomena to know that this wasn't just a random nightmare. His description of the girls, their eyes, and the overwhelming fear that gripped him all pointed to something more. The rational side of me wanted to chalk it up to the stress of fatherhood, the pressures of life, or even some leftover trauma from his earlier years. But the way he wrote, the sheer panic in his words, it felt too real, too immediate to be brushed off as another delusion. Alan had spent over a decade rebuilding his life. His journal detailed how he overcame immense grief, guilt, and the hallucinations that had plagued him after his family's deaths. He'd found happiness again with his wife Rosie and their children. He'd built a stable life, far removed from the chaos of his youth. But now, all of that seemed to be in jeopardy. I couldn't help but feel for him. He must have been terrified, not just because of what he saw, but because of what it represented. If the black-eyed figures were real, then everything he'd worked so hard to believe, that his mind had been healed, that he wasn't crazy, was falling apart. And if they weren't real, then it meant the hallucinations were back, creeping into his life when he least expected it. The journal entries that followed this one were short, erratic. Alan wrote about sleepless nights, how he started keeping the house locked up tight after dark, and how every time he heard a knock on the door, his heart would race. There was no longer any mention of stargazing with his telescope, or tucking his kids in at night. It was as if a cloud of dread had settled over his home, and he was just waiting for the other shoe to drop. The next entry that stood out was from a few weeks later. Dear Journal, it happened again last night. This time it wasn't just the girls. Rosie and I were watching TV when there was a knock at the door. It was late, maybe around 11. I didn't want to answer it, not after last time, but Rosie insisted. She said I was being paranoid, that it was probably just someone who needed help, maybe one of the neighbors. I didn't want to scare her, so I opened the door, praying it would just be a lost traveler or something. But no, there he was. It was the boy, the same one I'd seen all those years ago. The one I'd convinced myself was just a hallucination, a product of my trauma. He was standing there, staring up at me, with those same black eyes. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, silent. Rosie was right behind me, and I felt her hand on my arm, probably wondering why I wasn't saying anything. And then, he spoke. "Can I come in?" he asked, in that same eerie, emotionless voice I remembered from before. I slammed the door in his face without a second thought, locking it, bolting it, doing whatever I could to keep him out. Rosie was yelling at me, asking what the hell was going on, but I couldn't explain it. How do you tell someone that the figure from your deepest nightmares is standing on your front porch? I didn't sleep that night. Every little noise made me jump. I kept expecting to hear another knock, to see those black eyes staring through the windows. But the boy didn't come back. Not that night, anyway. Alan's writing became more fragmented after that. He stopped journaling about his family altogether, and focused solely on the black-eyed figures. He was convinced they were targeting him, that they were somehow connected to the tragedies in his past. His entries were filled with paranoia, each one shorter and more erratic than the last. The final entry I read was almost illegible. Dear Journal, they won't stop. They keep knocking, asking to come in. I can't let them in. I won't. But they're getting louder. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep them out. That was the last thing Alan wrote. After that, there were no more entries, no more signs of his thoughts or feelings. The journal just ended. I wish I could say that I knew what happened to him after that, but the truth is, I don't. When I first got the box of his belongings, I wasn't told much about his fate. I've tried to find out more since then, but every lead I've followed has gone cold. It's as if Alan and his family just disappeared. Whether it was the black-eyed figures that got him, or if something else entirely happened, I may never know. All I know is that whatever those figures were, they had haunted him for decades, and in the end, they won. This was the turning point. For Alan, his desperation was palpable as I read through those final entries. He'd been strong, or at least he had tried to be, for so long. The journal entries revealed a man who was doing everything he could to protect his family, even as he felt himself unraveling. But when the demon started directly interacting with his children, taking his son's hand, playing games with his daughters, Alan knew he was out of options. He had lost control over his home, his safe space, and worst of all, over himself. His perception of reality had become so warped that he could no longer trust his own mind. Were his daughters safe? Were they really his daughters at all? Or had the black-eyed children already taken them? The fear of losing them, or worse, of being the one to hurt them, became all-consuming. I found it chilling how Alan acknowledged this possibility in his last journal entry. Dear Journal, I'm afraid I'm running out of time. The nightmares are getting worse. Every night, I see them, my own kids, their eyes black as coal, dragging me out of bed, holding me down, making me watch as they do things, unspeakable things to Rosie and Charlie. I don't know if I can trust myself anymore. I'm terrified I'll wake up one day, and it won't just be a nightmare. What if I lose control? What if it's me who hurts them? I don't want to be that man. I can't be that man. My family deserves better, but I don't know how much longer I can fight this. I've started locking myself in the basement at night, just in case. If I do something, I want to make sure it's to me and not them. That was the last coherent entry before the writing devolved into rambling. Alan's entries became scattered, disjointed thoughts, bits and pieces of nightmares, regrets, and overwhelming guilt. He stopped referring to the black-eyed children as something external and began speaking as though they were a part of him. His thoughts, his urges, his final words, written in shaky handwriting on the last page, sent a chill down my spine. I can't protect them anymore. They're already here. God forgive me. After that, the journal abruptly ended. There were no more entries, no further explanations. The man who had poured his heart and soul into documenting his struggles had gone silent. I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of sadness and dread. Alan had been fighting for so long, for his sanity, for his family, and in the end, it seemed like the darkness had won. Whether it was the black-eyed children or his own deteriorating mental state, something had finally broken him. But the most unsettling part, I still didn't know what had happened to him or his family. The journals were my only link to Alan's fate, and they offered no closure. For days after finishing the last entry, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Was he still out there, somewhere? Or had the black-eyed children finally claimed him? At first, I thought Kim's lake house would be a straightforward job, just another property to clear out and catalog. But the more time I spent there, the more I began to feel unsettled. There was nothing particularly off-putting about the house at first glance. In fact, it was quite charming. The lakefront view was beautiful, and the house was well kept, even cozy, but there was something beneath the surface. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The first strange thing happened when I went into one of the guest bedrooms to clear out some old magazines and empty the closet. As I started boxing up what looked like old fishing gear and board games, I caught a whiff of something strange. It wasn't the typical musty smell of a lake house. This was sharp, metallic, like pennies or rust. I figured it might have been some old tools or forgotten camping gear that had been left damp and was now corroding. But I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Later, as I was organizing the items I'd set aside, I noticed something odd about the pacifier with the butterfly pattern. It was so specific, and it didn't seem like something a family with older children would have lying around. I remembered the family mentioning that none of Kim's children had infants, at least, not recently. I dismissed it at first, thinking maybe it was from a previous Airbnb guest, or perhaps someone had brought a baby along during a family gathering and left it behind. Still, it didn't sit right with me. I tried to shake off the weird feeling as I continued my work. That evening I took a break on the porch to watch the sunset over the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the fading pinks and oranges of the sky. It was peaceful, at least. It should have been. But, as I stood there, taking in the view, I felt this overwhelming sensation that I was being watched. The hair on the back of my neck prickled, and my skin crawled with unease. I scanned the area, expecting to see someone on the other side of the lake, or maybe a boat drifting in the distance, but there was no one. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. Shaking it off as nothing more than fatigue, I went back inside. I tried to focus on finishing up for the day, boxing more items for donation, trash, and sorting things that seemed sentimental to the family. That's when I found the journal. Tucked away in the bottom drawer of Kim's bedside table was a small, leather-bound journal. The edges were worn, and it had that smell that old books get after years of being forgotten. It wasn't unusual to find personal journals or letters when cleaning out properties like this, but something about this one made me pause. Maybe it was the fact that it had been tucked away so carefully, as if hidden on purpose. Curiosity got the better of me, and I sat down to flip through it. Most of the entries were what you'd expect: notes about family gatherings, trips to the lake, even some musings about the weather or her favorite recipes. But then, as I got further along, the tone of the writing began to shift. Kim started mentioning strange occurrences, lights flickering, hearing footsteps when no one was around. A constant feeling of being watched when she was alone at the lake house. One entry in particular stopped me cold. April 12th. I saw her again today. The little girl by the water. She was standing near the dock, just staring at the house. She didn't move, didn't wave, didn't speak. I called out to her, but she didn't respond. When I went down to check, she was gone, but the air by the water was freezing, colder than it should have been for this time of year. I don't know who she is, but I've seen her before. I think she's trying to tell me something. Deepest nightmares is standing on your front porch. I didn't sleep that night. Every little noise made me jump. I kept expecting to hear another knock, to see those black eyes staring through the windows. But the boy didn't come back. Not that night, anyway. Alan's writing became more fragmented after that. He stopped journaling about his family altogether and focused solely on the black-eyed figures. He was convinced they were targeting him, that they were somehow connected to the tragedies in his past. His entries were filled with paranoia, each one shorter and more erratic than the last. The final entry I read was almost illegible. Dear Journal, they won't stop. They keep knocking, asking to come in. I can't let them in. I won't. But they're getting louder. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep them out. That was the last thing Alan wrote. After that, there were no more entries, no more signs of his thoughts or feelings. The journal just ended. I wish I could say that I knew what happened to him after that, but the truth is, I don't. When I first got the box of his belongings, I wasn't told much about his fate. I've tried to find out more since then, but every lead I've followed has gone cold. It's as if Alan and his family just disappeared, whether it was the black-eyed figures that got him, or if something else entirely happened. I may never know. All I know is that whatever those figures were, they had haunted him for decades, and in the end, they won. This was the turning point. For Alan, his desperation was palpable as I read through those final entries. He'd been strong, or at least he had tried to be, for so long. The journal entries revealed a man who was doing everything he could to protect his family, even as he felt himself unraveling. But when the demon started directly interacting with his children, taking his son's hand, playing games with his daughters, Alan knew he was out of options. He had lost control over his home, his safe space, and worst of all, over himself. His perception of reality had become so warped that he could no longer trust his own mind. Were his daughters safe? Were they really his daughters at all? Or had the black-eyed children already taken them? The fear of losing them, or worse, of being the one to hurt them, became all consuming. I found it chilling how Alan acknowledged this possibility in his last journal entry. Dear Journal, I'm afraid I'm running out of time. The nightmares are getting worse. Every night, I see them, my own kids, their eyes black as coal, dragging me out of bed, holding me down, making me watch as they do things, unspeakable things to Rosie and Charlie. I don't know if I can trust myself anymore. I'm terrified I'll wake up one day, and it won't just be a nightmare. What if I lose control? What if it's me who hurts them? I don't want to be that man. I can't be that man. My family deserves better, but I don't know how much longer I can fight this. I've started locking myself in the basement at night, just in case. If I do something, I want to make sure it's to me and not them. That was the last coherent entry before the writing devolved into rambling. Alan's entries became scattered, disjointed thoughts, bits and pieces of nightmares, regrets, and overwhelming guilt. He stopped referring to the black-eyed children as something external and began speaking as though they were a part of him, his thoughts, his urges, his final words, written in shaky handwriting on the last page, sent a chill down my spine. I can't protect them anymore. They're already here. God forgive me. After that, the journal abruptly ended. There were no more entries, no further explanations. The man who had poured his heart and soul into documenting his struggles had gone silent. I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of sadness and dread. Alan had been fighting for so long, for his sanity, for his family, and in the end, it seemed like the darkness had won. Whether it was the black-eyed children or his own deteriorating mental state, something had finally broken him. But the most unsettling part, I still didn't know what had happened to him or his family. The journals were my only link to Alan's fate, and they offered no closure. For days after finishing the last entry, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Was he still out there, somewhere? Or had the black-eyed children finally claimed him? At first, I thought Kim's lake house would be a straightforward job, just another property to clear out and catalog. But the more time I spent there, the more I began to feel unsettled. There was nothing particularly off-putting about the house at first glance. In fact, it was quite charming. The lakefront view was beautiful, and the house was well kept, even cozy, but there was something beneath the surface. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The first strange thing happened when I went into one of the guest bedrooms to clear out some old magazines and empty the closet. As I started boxing up what looked like old fishing gear and board games, I caught a whiff of something strange. It wasn't the typical musty smell of a lake house. This was sharp, metallic, like pennies or rust. I figured it might have been some old tools or forgotten camping gear that had been left damp and was now corroding. But I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Later, as I was organizing the items I'd set aside, I noticed something odd about the pacifier with the butterfly pattern. It was so specific, and it didn't seem like something a family with older children would have lying around. I remembered the family mentioning that none of Kim's children had infants, at least, not recently. I dismissed it at first, thinking maybe it was from a previous Airbnb guest, or perhaps someone had brought a baby along during a family gathering and left it behind. Still, it didn't sit right with me. I tried to shake off the weird feeling as I continued my work. That evening I took a break on the porch to watch the sunset over the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the fading pinks and oranges of the sky. It was peaceful, at least. It should have been. But, as I stood there, taking in the view, I felt this overwhelming sensation that I was being watched. The hair on the back of my neck prickled, and my skin crawled with unease. I scanned the area, expecting to see someone on the other side of the lake, or maybe a boat drifting in the distance, but there was no one. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. Shaking it off as nothing more than fatigue, I went back inside. I tried to focus on finishing up for the day, boxing more items for donation, trash, and sorting things that seemed sentimental to the family. That's when I found the journal. Tucked away in the bottom drawer of Kim's bedside table was a small, leather-bound journal. The edges were worn, and it had that smell that old books get after years of being forgotten. It wasn't unusual to find personal journals or letters when cleaning out properties like this, but something about this one made me pause. Maybe it was the fact that it had been tucked away so carefully, as if hidden on purpose. Curiosity got the better of me, and I sat down to flip through it. Most of the entries were what you'd expect: notes about family gatherings, trips to the lake, even some musings about the weather or her favorite recipes. But then, as I got further along, the tone of the writing began to shift. Kim started mentioning strange occurrences, lights flickering, hearing footsteps when no one was around. A constant feeling of being watched when she was alone at the lake house. One entry in particular stopped me cold. April 12th. I saw her again today. The little girl by the water. She was standing near the dock, just staring at the house. She didn't move, didn't wave, didn't speak. I called out to her, but she didn't respond. When I went down to check, she was gone, but the air by the water was freezing, colder than it should have been for this time of year. I don't know who she is, but I've seen her before. I think she's trying to tell me something. Describe his rage. It pawed at the porch one last time, the fur around its hooves brushing the wood like a broom, before it slowly backed down the steps and disappeared into the dark forest. I let out a shaky breath, collapsing into one of the chairs by the door. My whole body was trembling, my mind racing to process what had just happened. It wasn't just the deer, it was the forest, it was the cabin. There was something wrong with this entire place, something dark and ancient that had seeped into the land and taken root. I didn't want to stay another minute. I needed to leave. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and began throwing my things into it. I didn't care about finishing the job anymore. Kim's family could sort through the rest on their own. I just needed to get out of there, and fast. As I made my way toward the door, I glanced one last time at the wind chime. The evil eyes swayed gently, their blue irises catching the dim light. There was something about them, something unsettling, yet protective, that made me hesitate. I wasn't sure what to do. Should I leave the wind chime there, where it had been for who knows how long, or take it with me? If it really was some kind of charm, maybe I should bring it, in case whatever force that had taken hold of the deer followed me. But what if it was only effective here, at the cabin? What if taking it would make things worse? I stood there, torn, until a sudden noise from outside snapped me out of my thoughts. It sounded like something moving through the underbrush, something large. My heart rate skyrocketed again. I didn't have time to debate. I grabbed the door handle, threw it open, and ran out to my car, glancing only briefly toward the tree line as I did. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing among the trees, watching me. It was small, child-sized, just like the figure mentioned in the warning review. But when I blinked, it was gone, swallowed by the darkness. I didn't look back again. I jumped into my car, started the engine, and sped away from Kim's lake house, my headlights cutting through the dense night as I drove down the winding road. The further I got from the cabin, the lighter the air seemed to feel, and by the time I reached the main highway, the suffocating pressure in my chest had finally eased. But I knew I wasn't done with this place. Whatever was happening at that cabin, whatever dark force was out there, it wasn't going to be contained by the wind chime forever. And as much as I hated the idea, I had a sinking feeling that I would have to return, not just to finish Kim's affairs, but to find out what was truly hiding in those woods. The tension of that night lingered with me long after I drove away from the cabin, like a shadow, refusing to let go. My heart still raced when I thought about the deer, the grotesque transformation, the sharp grin. It felt like a twisted memory, one that blurred the line between reality and nightmare at home. The wind chime hung by the door, a constant reminder of the horrors that had transpired. I kept it there for protection, as if its presence could ward off whatever darkness lingered beyond my threshold. Every time I heard it chime in the wind, a shiver ran down my spine, but I convinced myself it was better to have it closed than to risk unleashing its fury again. In the weeks that followed, the news circulated about the family who bought the cabin. They seemed blissfully unaware of the haunting history, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far beyond their comprehension. I heard rumors about strange occurrences, disappearances of pets, children complaining, of nightmares, and the eerie feeling of being watched. It all echoed back to that sinister deer, and I hoped they would leave before it turned into something worse. The ledger became my solace, a record of the lives that had touched that place. Each review told a story, a glimpse into joy and horror intermingled, all tied together by that wretched forest. I had put it on display in my makeshift museum, a testament to what I had endured and the twisted tales I had uncovered. Every visitor who saw it was drawn in, fascinated by the mundane transforming into the macabre. But only I knew the true weight behind the words, the fear hidden between the lines. As time passed, the nightmares receded, replaced by the mundane rhythms of life. I buried myself in my work, focusing on the objects I had collected, the stories they told. Yet, every so often, I'd find myself jolted awake in the dead of night, cold sweat clinging to my skin, haunted by the image of that deer grinning at me. Those were the nights I'd sit up, staring at the wind chime, the moonlight casting eerie shadows through my window. I began to wonder if I'd ever truly escaped the grip of that place. Was the wind chime really a protector, or had it become a tether, binding me to the horrors I thought I had left behind? I started to keep a closer eye on my dream catchers, rearranging them in the hopes they'd catch any remnants of fear and despair before they could take root in my mind. Sometimes I'd go through the old reviews in the ledger, searching for clues or hints about the deer, the forest, anything that could help me understand. I came across entries that spoke of local legends, stories of spirits residing within the trees, of animals cursed to protect the secrets of the woods. One particularly chilling account recounted a family who had tried to capture the deer, only to vanish without a trace. Those tales made my skin crawl, yet they also sparked a burning curiosity. I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the kid who went missing after the house was sold. Had they wandered too close to the woods? Did they encounter the same twisted creature I had? I felt an unsettling sense of responsibility, as if I hadn't done enough to warn the world about the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of that idyllic retreat. Despite the unease, I found myself yearning for the thrill of uncovering more stories, diving deeper into the shadows that had once threatened to consume me. I started attending local folklore gatherings, listening to the whispers of old tales and legends. Each story reminded me of that fateful night, and I couldn't help but share my own, carefully omitting the most horrifying details while still imparting the gravity of what I had experienced. My connection to the wind chime deepened, and in an odd way, it became a part of my identity. I was the curator of the strange and unusual, the keeper of stories that skirted the edges of reality. And while the nightmares still crept back occasionally, I embraced them as a part of my journey, a reminder of the boundaries between light and dark. I learned to appreciate the calm that followed the storm, the moments when the wind would catch the chimes just right, filling my home with a soft, melodic sound. It felt like a dance with fate, a reminder that though darkness may linger, there was also light, beauty, and resilience. I'd faced the terror head on and come out the other side, ready to embrace whatever came next, armed with my stories and my wind chime. One evening I was dizzy from the heat and dust after helping my cousin Samuel dig post holes out on the far side of his family's property near Shiprock, New Mexico. We'd been working since morning, trying to fix up a collapsed section of the fence line, and the sun had baked the land until even the lizards gave up and hid. We were just about to pack up when Sam's shovel hit something. It wasn't rock, it rang like metal striking bone, and when we cleared the dirt around it, we found something neither of us was ready for. It was wrapped in an old Navajo blanket, rotted through, but with strange symbols drawn all over it in faded white chalk. There were feathers tied into the edges, and inside, bones. Animal bones, but not from any creature I could name. Long femurs, sharp, unnatural teeth. A skull that looked too narrow to be coyote, too pointed to be human. Samuel's face went pale the moment he saw it. He didn't say a word, just stood up, walked to the truck, grabbed his can of gas, and came back. "I thought I buried this thing." "Good," he muttered. Then he doused it in gasoline and lit it on fire. The flames didn't roar, they hissed, like whatever was inside the blanket was wet, or trying to scream through the fire. We stood there, shielding our faces, not talking, only, when the flames died down, did Samuel speak. "You don't tell anyone, understand?" I nodded, too afraid to ask, but later that night, something came back. I was sleeping on the couch in Sam's trailer when I woke up to a scratching sound. Soft, slow, deliberate. It wasn't a mouse, it was fingernails on aluminum. Then came the smell, like old blood and dirt and something rotting in the sun, and the voice. "You took what was mine." I sat up, heart pounding, and standing outside the screen door was a shape, tall, hunched, wearing a dead animal's skin over its shoulders. Its eyes burned, not with fire, but with hate. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It just stood there, staring at me. The shadows made its face blur, shift. One moment it looked like Sam, then like me, then like something else entirely. Then it stepped back, sank into the dark, and vanished. When Sam came out, gun in hand, it was already gone. He didn't ask what I saw, just sat down beside me and said, "That's what happens when you try to bury something that ain't dead." I left the next morning and never went back. 3 weeks later, Samuel disappeared. They said his truck was found on the side of the road, engine running, door open, no signs of a struggle. But I know better. He'd dug up something sacred, something ancient. And whatever it was, it came back for him. One night something happened, which I cannot forget, no matter how many times I try to reason it away or chalk it up to a bad dream. I was 25, living in Gallup, New Mexico, working construction during the week and spending weekends helping my aunt near Window Rock with her livestock. That particular weekend, I stayed later than usual. One of her goats had gone missing, and she was convinced it wasn't just coyotes. She'd found the fence torn open, not chewed, not dug under, torn, like something with hands had grabbed and yanked. That night, I found out she was right. It started with the smell. Not outside, inside the house. I was on the pole, out couch in the living room, dozing off, when I caught the scent, sharp and raw, like meat left too long in the heat. Not rotting, exactly, fresher, more metallic. Then came the sounds, scraping on the walls, slow, deliberate steps on the roof, and finally, the voice. "Miguel, come outside. I need to talk to you." It was my Uncle Jorge's voice, but he'd been dead 5 years. I froze. I didn't move, didn't even blink. "Miguel," the voice was right outside the window now, barely muffled by the curtain. "It's me. Let me in." But the voice didn't sound tired or warm like my uncle's had. It was too clear, too crisp. like someone imitating him through a speaker. I held my breath. The air inside the room was thick, so heavy it felt like it was pressing down on my chest. I waited, and then I heard it start scratching the glass. Click, click, click. Not claws, nails, human, but too long. Too sharp. The scratching stopped. I thought maybe it had left, but that smell, the blood, metal smell, was stronger now. Then I heard it sniffing. Right outside, you smell like your mother. My stomach twisted. It wasn't a compliment, it was a threat. I didn't sleep that night. By dawn, it was gone. I stepped outside and found faint prints in the red dirt beneath the window. Bare feet, but wrong. Too long, too narrow, like they'd been stretched. The worst part, the smell followed me back to Gallup, to my apartment. 4 days after, I would catch a whiff of that scent in my hallway, or in the shower, or behind me at the gas station, and sometimes at night. I swear I hear breathing outside my window, shallow, measured, waiting. I don't talk about it much. My aunt says it was a skinwalker, that it marked me. She gave me crushed juniper and ash in a pouch to hang over my door, said not to throw it away, even if the smell fades. So far, it hasn't. And every few weeks, the voice returns, a little closer, a little more familiar. I was 16 when it happened to me. We lived on the outskirts of Chinle, Arizona, not far from the canyon rim. My older brother Isaiah and I shared a room, bunk bed style. He was on top, I was on the bottom. We weren't rich, but we had enough. And even though we fought a lot, he always made me feel safer at night. Until that night. Until I saw something that looked like Isaiah, but wasn't. It started after our dog, Buster, went missing. He was half healer, half wolfhound, mean as hell to strangers, but never left our side. One morning he just didn't come back from the yard. My dad said a coyote probably got him, but even at 16 I knew that wasn't right. The fence was intact. No blood, no struggle, just gone. A couple of nights later, I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of something walking in the hall. Not heavy like boots, barefoot, the kind of soft thud you only hear when someone is deliberately trying not to make noise. I figured it was Isaiah going to the bathroom. But then I realized he was still on the top bunk, breathing deep, asleep. I sat up, confused, listened. The footsteps stopped right outside our door, and then came the voice. Isaiah, you up? My brother stirred, rolled over, mumbled something. Come out here, man, I need help. It was his voice, exactly perfectly, except it wasn't coming from inside the room. It was coming from outside our door. I started to shake. Isaiah sat up, slowly, like he was half asleep. What? He mumbled. The voice spoke again, this time lower. Open the door. Isaiah swung his legs down. I grabbed his arm. Don't, I whispered. That's not you. He looked at me like I was crazy, but something about the way I said it must have hit him, because he didn't move. We both sat there, frozen in the dark. Then, something walked past the bottom of our door, its shadow visible through the thin crack under the frame. It didn't walk like a person. It moved like it had too many joints in the wrong places. I swear to you, it turned and looked right at the door, at us, and it grinned. We didn't see its face, but we felt the grin, like it was smiling with something other than a mouth. Then it whispered, "That's okay. I'll come back when you're alone." It didn't walk away. It just stopped being there. And suddenly, the night was quiet again, too. Quiet. No crickets, no wind, nothing. My mom burned sage the next morning, when Isaiah finally told her. She was pale and silent for the rest of the day. Said something had been trying to trick us, trying to get in. We never saw it again after that. But every now and then, I'll be outside, alone, and hear Isaiah's voice behind me. even though I know he's not there. And Buster, we never found him, but sometimes at night, I still hear a faint scratching at the back door and the low growl of a dog that isn't really a dog at all.